We continue with the second chapter of the book of Micah. Hoy choshvei avenu foralei ra al mishkevotam, ba'or aboker yasuha ki yesh le'el yadam. In the first chapter, Micah really described the sins of Bnei Israel being idolatrous sins, talking about worshiping idols. Here now he turns from what we call Ben Adam leMakom to Ben Adam leChavera. All those who plan iniquity and have designed and they have evil thoughts on their bed while they're lying down at night, they're thinking about how can I cheat this guy? How can I defraud this person? What strategy can I use to trick this person in a business deal? That's what they're doing at night. They're not dreaming of a better world. And then in the next morning at the Or HaBoker, they do it because they have that power. And those words, Yesh Le'el Yadam, are very similar words that's used actually by Lavan. When Lavan is chasing, Yaakov runs away from Lavan, and Lavan is upset that his daughters and his grandchildren have run away, and he chases after Yaakov, and God comes to Lavan in a dream and says, don't harm my man Yaakov. And the next day, Lavan comes to Yaakov and he says to him, Yesh Le'el Yadi, if it was up to me, I have the power to do something to you. But the God of your ancestors came to me and said, don't do something for you. So we have turned, and Lavan is the classical understanding of a trickster, of somebody who attempts to use fraud. And that's who Bnei Israel have become. Something that's intriguing about it, but it's not, is that at this point in time, Assyria has ascended. Before this, the great enemy of the northern kingdom was Aram, were the Arameans, were Lavan HaArami. I'm not saying he's the forefather of all of the Arameans, but when you think of Aram, it's hard not to think of Lavan. And part of the issue back in the book of Kings, I don't know if we got to this, part of the issue back in the book of Kings is that many of the kings of the northern kingdom, they don't want to run away from Aram. They want a relationship with Aram. Yaakov had to run away. Bnei Israel has to run away from the kingdom of Aram, and so here we see it's very much seeped into the culture with the usage of that word. Okay, next verses will be faster. Continuing, pasuk bet v'chamdu sadot v'gazalu v'atim v'nasau v'ashku gever uveitov ish v'nachlato. They covet fields, and what do? They seize them, houses, and they take them away. They defraud men of their homes and people of their land. The most obvious example of this is, of course, King Achav, when he wanted the field of the person who lived next door to him, and he offered money for it, and the king wouldn't, and the man wouldn't take it, and then his wife figures out a way, Ezel figures out a way to kill the man, and so they are able to take his land. Now, that's the example of the king, but it's not only being done by the king, it's being done by many in order to, and very often, as we've said in the book of Amos, and here it's the squeezing of the poor, squeezing of the people who do not have power. Lachein ko amar Adonai, hineni choshev al mishpacha azot ra'a asher lo tamishu misham tzavarotechem velo telchu roma ki eit ra'ahi. And therefore, God says, I'm planning misfortune against this family, that you will not be able to free your necks from your tzavar, right? Your neck. You will not be able to walk straight, to walk erect, because it will be a time of disaster. Bayomahu, we're in Pasuk Dalet, verse 4. Yisa lechem mashal v'naha nehi nihiyeh amar shadod nishadunu chelek ami yamir eich yamishli l'shovev shadinu yichalek. Something that we talked about yesterday. There's a lot of alliteration in the book of Micah. We pointed out a couple of times in yesterday's chapter, and here we have him using naha, nehi, nehiyah. This sort of like, it's like a lament, a cry out, and shadod, nishadunu, right? So on that day, when you want to recite a mashal, a poem, but what's going to come out is an ache, a groan, a bitter lament. This nehi is often sort of like oi, something of that sort, but obviously expressing much more than just the the price of meat went up again. Something a little bit more intense than that, especially if you're a vegetarian, right? And what are they going to say? My people's portion has changed hand. Our field is allotted to rebels. We are ravaged. We are destroyed, right? God has left them. Lachein lo yelecha mashlich chevel bigoral b'kal Adonai. None of you will have a a rope in the assembly of God, a rope. It seems like God has cut the relationship with Bnei Israel. A chevel means a rope, or here it says a cord, that you're going to be completely separated. Al tatifu yatifun, lo yatifu le'ele, lo yisag limot. There we see it again with the alliteration. Stop preaching, they preach. That's no way to preach. Shame shall not overtake us. And most of the majority of commentaries understand that these are the people saying to Micah, and maybe saying also to Amos and the others. Micah's understood as being a little younger than the others, because they started all during the kingdom of Uzziyahu, and he started a little bit later. But that the prophets are saying, don't tell us this. Stop preaching. We don't want to hear this. We don't want you to tell us this stuff. That's something we saw so very much in the book of Amos. They said, Amos was told, go back to Yehuda. Don't make a living here in Israel and telling of us how our kingdom is going to be destroyed. So here they're saying the same thing. There's one commentary who says that actually says that Amos was saying this to other prophets, whether they be false prophets or whether they be other prophets with similar messages to him, that it's not going to end well for you. Think back to the book of Yirmiyahu and the attempts of killing Yirmiyahu because he was saying things that were extraordinarily unpopular. Continue in verse 7. Amor Beit Yaakov akatzar ruach Adonai elam ma'alav halo divarai yetivu im hayashar holech. Is the house of Yaakov condemned? Is God's patience so short? Has this been the practice? To be sure, my words are friendly to those who walk upright. Right. So those who say this is Bnei Israel saying it, right? Why is God so angry? Have we done? Why can't God have a little bit of compassion, a little bit of mercy? Ve'etmol ami le'oyev yikomem mimul salma eder tafshitun me'ovrim betach shuvei milchama. But an enemy is arising at my people, and it will take the mantle with the cloak, right? And it will pass through those who are turned away from war, those who turn away from war. Nishei ami tigar shun. This is turning back not from the enemies, not from the punishment and the disaster that would happen, but back to the behavior that's going on. You drive the women of my people away from their pleasant homes. This is what the seemingly the defrauders, the ones who are lying in their beds, thinking about how they can cheat and trick and steal and etc. They somehow drive the women of my people away from their homes. You deprive their infants of my glory forever, right? That this is they're enslaving people. There are those who explain that, maybe they kidnap the wives to make up for the debts that the husbands have incurred. And why have they incurred these debts? Because their wealthy business partners have tricked them. Kumu uluchu, we're in verse 10, ki lo zot hamnucha ba'avor tam'ah techabel v'chevel nimratz. Here we have the word chevel again. We have it used with the word tichabel again with the alliteration. Up and get up and go. This is not a resting place because of your defilement. Terrible destruction shall befall. There we told the word hevel here is less used as a cord or as a rope, but more if we think of the modern word in Hebrew, a michabel is a terrorist. Because of your terrorism, because of your horror, because of the terrible way that you have acted, these things are happening. You're going to go into exile. You're going to leave from this pure land. Lu ish holech ruach v'sheker kizev atif l'cha layayin v'lashechar v'haya matif ha'amazeh. If someone were going to start speaking utter falsehoods and say, right, I'm in favor of wine and liquor, that would be a preacher who's acceptable to this people. Meaning, if somebody would say, go and eat, go and drink, because tomorrow we shall die, right? If somebody's telling you just to enjoy life and not to worry about things and not to repent, that's what the people would want. That's what they want to hear, whether it's because tomorrow we will die, or whether it be, as it's been in other books, because they're deluded and thinking that nothing bad is going to happen to them. Either way to look at it, that's what the people want. They do not want to hear, as many people don't want to hear. Nobody wants to hear criticism. I shouldn't say nobody, but the great majority of the population doesn't want to hear criticism, doesn't want to be told how to do things better. Asof Yaakov, Kulach, Kabetz, Akabetz. There we see it again, right? Asof, Kabetz, Akabetz. Sherit Yisrael, Yachad, Asimenu, Kitson, Batsra. Ke'eder betoch hadavro Tihimena me Adam. I will gather you together, Jacob. I will bring together all of the remnant of Israel, and I will make them all like sheep of Batsra, like a flock in its pen. They will be noisy with people. Or those majority of commentaries understand that here the chapter is turning, as we've seen earlier in the book of Micah, where in the first chapter and in other chapters we'll see where he turns from the horrors that are going to happen with words of comfort. So this is God, according to many majority of commentaries, is not assembling Jacob in exile, but assembling Jacob to bring back together the remnant of Israel, to bring them back to their land. Allah haporetz lifnehem. One who makes a breach will go before them, and they will enlarge it to be a gate. What is the poretz? The poretz is somebody who breaks something. Who right there are those who try to explain that that word is specifically used because if we think the children of Yehuda is Peretz, and Peretz is the right from Yehuda, from that family comes King David, who we know are the kings forever. And if you look at the verse continues now in 13, Vaya'avor malkam lifnehem, and their king marches before them, Va'adonai birosham, and God at their head. So the king makes sense. You would word this word poretz, like Peretz, one who breaks through when he's bored. The one who breaks through is ultimately the leader, which is the king, who presumably is a descendant of David, but in front of them is God is leading them back. And so different ways of understanding whether or not this is supposed to be comfort at the end of the chapter. It seems like that is what it's supposed to be. The king is there with God in front of him and the people behind him, and that will allow for a sense of victory. Those who understand this, that maybe it was referring to the days of Chizkiyahu who rebels and remains faithful to God during the time period of the great Assyrian king Sanherib, and God is in front of him, and God had this miraculous victory, and all the Assyrian army run away. And this would be during the time period of Micah and of these other prophets. So here we see again, it's a classical Nevi'im Achronim, second Nevi'ah, later prophets. This whole idea of destruction is going to happen, but then the hopefulness comes. Here, it doesn't even say that Bnei Yisrael have repented to allow this to happen, but presumably we can understand that at some point that must have happened if God is ready to be at their head and taking them back to their homeland.